Hello, Miss Viv Adcock. How are you? Welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming on and watching us.
Hello, Miss Susie Godsey.
Hello,
Hello,
hello.
everybody. I feel very hot and flushed today. It's a really warm day. So if I'm glowing, that's why.
Yay.
So how
Well,
much training can your animal take, Susie?
that's a really good question, Viv, I would say. Um, yeah, I mean, I think we sort of had a conversation last week, and we were like, hey, let's maybe continue a little bit with the topic, because sometimes people get really frustrated when their animals aren't doing what they want, and you know and it becomes this, yeah, it becomes sort of this riff in the relationship when animals are not desiring or cannot be controlled by us. And I think training is a little bit of that, like, in a way, in a way training is about creating a situation where an animal knows what we desire and does it on command. Like, for example, a dog will sit or lay down or come when called, that kind of stuff. Or a cat will use the litter box, or there's many, many, many examples of that. But one thing I wanted to say is that, to me, training actually really doesn't have to do with communication skills, because communicating with an animal really, to me, doesn't mean that now it will do what I want. It just means that I have an understanding of what's going on for them. And hopefully also I have a way to express what I desire from them, but not from the sense of now that I have told you what I desire, that means you're going to give it to me. No, but also animal communication can assist in training, because if you really are willing to be connected with your animal, you might know what actually is a way to show them things that actually works for them, because we all learn in a different way. And I think that sometimes is also tricky when you try to make every animal basically respond to the same techniques that you do know. So that's kind of where I wanted to, like, just bring this up, because again, I think there's a lot of misconception about what is actually animal communication. And to me, it's really not about now you finally will do what I'm telling you.
Yeah, that's a great misconception, because for me, communication, it's a two-way street. You ask, you listen, you communicate, Susie, and I sit and listen to you, and I always learn something. And then, when I start talking, then you create the space for me to communicate. And for the listeners, you're listening in. So it's this active engagement. It's not this, nah, 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 I'm going to tell you what to do, and I'm going to shout at you. The amount of people I see shouting at their dogs or at their kids. And I'm like, what do you think that's going to create? Is that actually going to create what you desire to have with this animal? Is what you're being creating what you desire? And if it isn't, then there's a whole new kingdom and a whole new world to play with. And this is the thing of, when it comes to training, it's a bond, it's a game that you're playing with them in regards to, how can I make this fun for them? How can I make this fun for me? How do I set boundaries? How do I create respect? How do I step up into being a greater leader? How can I create the space that this animal looks to me for, a sense of leadership or direction? And piggybacking on what we talked about last week, it was very much about learning to be much clearer and congruent with what you're asking for, getting clearer on what you desire to have as your relationship with your animal, or if there is something that you're teaching them or you desire them to, be with you if they're going to be part of your life. So, this, how much training can your animal take? It's knowing that when is enough? If you're training a puppy, if you're training it, like we talked about your horses last week, Susie, when an animal gives you a try, when they give you that indication that they've understood what you've said and they've actually followed through and done it, that you reward that. that you give them that feedback that, yes, this is what we're looking for. Well done. And this can be an energetic connection. It can be followed up and backed up with a verbal communication. But it's very much about indicating, yes, this is what we're aiming for, or no, this isn't what we're aiming for. And this whole concept of training, like you said, Susie, a lot of people assume that it's, well, this is the book, this is the method, this is supposed to be what it looks like, this is what their dog does, or their horse does, or their animal does, so therefore I have to do the same, rather than what you were just saying of, we are different, each one of us communicates differently, we desire to have a certain relationship or a bond with our animals. And then you also include the animal's personality and what's also going on in their world, and receiving them for where they're at and working with that. It's not about, like you said, this control and domination and force and expectation, because that's not going to create a willing, joyful engagement where the animal looks to you. They want to be with you.
Yeah. And I think you said you said a lot of brilliant things, and one was also the fun. Like, how often do we see training as like this thing that is like cumbersome, or we have to now be a certain person? Like, I think a lot of times when it comes to training, we sort of change personalities. Now I have to be this serious like thing, instead of like, how much fun can we have? And we were talking about that horse that you met last time that had really shut down because it had been overtrained, like overshown the same things again and 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 again, like where it really became this place where the horse was like, leave me alone. I know how to do this, but gosh, I really don't, it's no longer fun, and just because like a certain way of maybe training your animal might be fun, doesn't mean that you have to do the same thing over and over. Like, please, just look at it for yourself too. Like, and again, you cannot translate how you learn to how your animal learns by any means. But just if you get a sense of like, I don't want to do this anymore, maybe this is also in that moment, then also an awareness that your animal is okay with what you have just accomplished, and there is no necessity to keep going. Because I've so often literally seen with my horse too, like after a few times of doing something, I'm like, okay, now what? And now I'm like, oh, wait a minute, maybe the now what is actually her. Like, she's like, okay, cool, I know what you want, I've done it a couple times, now what? And then rather than going into that thing of, oh, I have to keep going until you know how to do this properly, so let's do it for another 10 minutes, 20 minutes, or an hour, where then it might become this place where all of a sudden it turns from joy into something else, and then you might have to fight through something. Because one thing about training is too, like, ending on a fun note, and please, just use yourself for that too. Like, would you rather play and learn something while it's fun, or would you rather bite yourself through it and basically come out the other end thinking, oh my God, this was treacherous, like I hope this never happens again? Like,
this is sounding a lot like some people's lives, I know, let me just say. Right. They're fighting with life, they're fighting with themselves, and there is no fun, there's no reward, there's no release of that pressure. And I think for a lot of animals, and this is what this horse was showing me, that there was no release in the pressure, there was no reward, there was no space just to be and to be received just for being. It was always do, right, do more, and do. And like you're saying, Susie, just repeating the same thing over and over. And if you think about, you're teaching a kid how to do 2 and 2 and 2 plus 2 or 4 plus 4, you don't spend an hour doing what's 2 plus 2. Right, now what's 2 plus 2? Right, now what's 2 plus 2? So, we'd like to shake things up a bit. We like to keep the brain engaged and switched on, and that interest there. And you're really developing your own ear, if you like. You're really developing your own sense when you're working with animals to know when enough is enough, when they've given you that try, they've given you that sit or that stand or that stay, or they've gotten what you've asked and you've rewarded it, not to keep repeating it, not to keep trying to drill it in. If they've done it once and you reward that and you move on to something else, like you say, Susie, finish on a good note, finish with something that feels good for them and for you. And I think a lot of the propensity there is, great, we've achieved something, now let's just go a bit further, let's just do a bit more, because that's kind of like our nature. It's like, what more? But knowing when the animal has had enough and they need time just to be, you know. And my old riding instructor, she said, look, I love to give them time just to soak. If they've been working out in the round yard, for instance, and they've done exactly what you've asked, and they've shown you something, or they've given you a try, or whatever that is, and then they look to come in and rest or just be with you, just be there. Let them soak it in, let them absorb, because often it's that space where a lot of the processing and a lot of that goes on. So, and I think that's a critical point that a lot of people miss, that breather, that space, or just finishing the training on the day, whether it's with your dog or your horse or whatever. So, and they are, I mean, they're teaching us as much as we're teaching them too. So, yeah.
Totally. You know, and it's interesting too, because I was actually watching a scene with like a younger horse, like, or did I talk about this already? That I was working with my 2-year-old foal, and I had never seen her go, you know, have any type of aggression towards me, even in the weirdest situations that I put her in. And yet, you know, I saw her actually act aggressively towards some kids that were pushing her, you know, and I had never seen her do that. And I realized, oh, this horse actually will go to a space where if she feels like she needs to defend herself, she will. And I was really surprised by that behavior, because I had never seen it before, but she had never offered it to me, even in situations where I felt I was pushing her. But apparently I never pushed her far enough that she had to choose that. And I think that's also something, you know, to know how far can you push without setting an animal into like a fight or flight mode. You don't ever want to do that, because, you know, you don't want to teach them that you will really trigger that in them. And it's not about not pushing them either. You know, I think this is where we have to be willing to really look at, okay, I can challenge you, you know, and how far can that challenge go? And challenges can be fun too. So it's really not that challenge is bad. Like, challenge can be a lot of fun. And then, but then also knowing, like, again, when is too much, you know? And if you ever see your animal having to go to a fight or flight response, have a look at that, and don't try to punish them for that then, because some people get really bent out of shape. Let's say the horse now comes towards you and bites, you know. It's like, yes, you please don't allow that. Give them a little slap, but don't overreact either, because then you might really go into like a, you know, please match the energy. And I think that's something too, like when you're working with an animal, please always look at what's the energy with which they are offering something. So if my horse all of a sudden turned and would give me their hind end, or try to kick at me, or try to bite me, I would take exactly the same amount of energy that they just used and just say, hey, no, nah, you know, I'm sorry, nah, you know. But a lot of times we go into like, oh my God, now I have to be aggressive and, you know, I have to now go after my animal to make sure they know who's boss. And I think that's the part where we as people, we can learn a lot from them and fine tune, you know, those responses. And please do watch animals interact with each other. You can learn so much from that. I mean, gosh, it's amazing to actually watch animals correct each other. You know, you can really get a very good sense of what is effective.
Yeah, and they can be very brutal. You know, I think there's a common, especially with horses, there's this, oh, I don't like you said, I'm going to give them a slap. It's like, you as a person could never hurt that horse with your bare hands or your feet or whatever as much as another horse would. You know, if you imagine a horse getting 2 rear feet on its rump or on its rib cage or whatever, it's like you could never hurt that animal. And I think this is a really touchy subject with a lot of people, because they think that delivering that energy or delivering that force or using whatever it is to go, hey, you're in my space, back off. This is dangerous. I need to own my space. You know, another horse doesn't walk all over another horse. They have this sphere of awareness where they know where they can tread and where they can't, and what space that animal, the other animal, requires. And that animal will be very easy, just flicking an ear back or an eye or an eyebrow, you know, or a swish of a tail to get them to move out of that space. So, but like you say, Susie, it's knowing how much energy to use to create that space and to create that communication, to create that level of respect as well within the herd, within whether it's your dog or whatever. And look, all of this, for those of you watching it, can seem really, oh my God, there's so much and it's so overwhelming. I've had to learn and play and discover. Susie's had to learn and play and discover. And this is what, for me, the greatest gift of the animal kingdom is. It is constantly challenging you to become more present and more aware, and, you know, be in the moment so much that you're perceiving the energy before it actually occurs. You're perceiving that subtle shift in energy before it escalates into something far greater, because once it's escalated, it's a whole lot more to bring that down. But if you have the awareness of the moment it starts to shift, and like you're saying, you're aware of it and you're able to correct and change that energy, you become an efficient leader that is respected without, like you say, getting involved and it getting worse and worse and tit for tat and all your emotions getting stirred up and getting into this fight, because that's never going to, you know, like I said earlier, it's not going to create what you desire. So what can you be? If there's something going on with your animals right now, what energy can you be? What energy is your animal inviting you to discover or embody or play with? And you don't have to know what it is. This sometimes is not a linear, oh, well, I've got to put this outfit on and be this. It's no, the moment you ask it to be a different energy, you can be that different energy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, it doesn't have to be complicated, but it can take a while to you know, to fine tune your ear, to build that sensitivity and that presence, to be aware of those subtle messages.
Totally. And, you know, and one thing I want to add to that is the good news about animals is they really don't hold a grudge, you know. So even if you make a mistake, like, please don't harbor that, because I have had times where I overreacted with my dogs and with everything. And, you know, and it's really like, do my dogs still love me? Yes. You know, are they afraid of me when I lift my hand? Absolutely not. You know, so, I mean, you know, have I made mistakes? Oh, yes, you know. But the good news is that the animals are really, they don't hold on to that, you know, and especially if you don't keep repeating it over and over and over. And I think that's the part where we have to be willing to let it go. You know, when we realize, like, whoa, I just responded with way too much energy. Take a breather, you know, like Viv was saying earlier, allow yourself to actually give yourself some space. You know, she was talking about the horse coming in and digesting something. Well, you can digest too. You know, if you just exploded and you did something and then you went, whoa, okay, that might have been way too much. Don't hang on to it. Just give yourself a breather. You know, stand around and lick and chew like a horse that's digesting information, you know, chewing and licking. Yeah. Stand around and, you know, have the energetic lick and chew yourself, where you're like, okay, wait a minute, this wasn't really what I desired. This is not really working. Can I please just now, you know, relax a little bit, let all that energy dissipate and just be there, you know, and you don't have to apologize either, in a way like, yes, you can say, whoa, I'm so sorry, that was not what I had intended. But at the same time, don't try and now fix it. Just change your energy. You know, that's all required. And watch that too, like with animals, you know, like Viv was saying, like a horse that just kicks another horse, if it got it out of its space, it just turns around and starts grazing again. There's no harboring of anger, you know, holding on to it or or setting one on top of it, because it's like, no, you gave me space. Okay, thanks. Now I graze again, or just stand around and look around. Like, that's also what we can learn from the animals, that we hold on to stuff, they really don't. Like, they created what they wanted to create. Okay, now let's graze again, you know?
Yeah, and I think another important part of this, just to stress, we've touched on it, is have fun, play. You know, it's not all about serious training. I mean, how much did you enjoy going to school 5 days a week for 8 hours a day? How much of that was fun for you, you know? But if you had a fun teacher, or you had PE, or you had pottery or art or something interspersed, it just kept, you know, you're fresh, you're able to engage more thoroughly. So, you know, I think people go, well, I've got to train for hours on end. No, maybe sometimes just hanging the hay net up, putting their rugs on, taking your dog for a walk, that's training. It doesn't have to be this, we're in a training situation now and you're out there for hours on end or trying to perfect something. Sometimes it's like, you know what, let's just play today. Let's just play and scratch each other, or just roll around on the floor with your dog. Or what if you intersperse it with some playtime, so they're not always feeling that they've got to deliver, or they're under pressure, or you're in that intense energy. Because remember, animals, and their way of communicating is with energy. So if you go in with this intense intention and pressure and expectation, they're going to sense all of that. And it's not, you're going in with an energy of, right, this is what we're doing today, you know, like the schoolmaster, rather than, okay, this was the plan. And this is the great thing about horses. You can go into the round yard with a plan and it can all go out of the window in about 3 seconds. You know, so it's really important to keep that play aspect in that and keep it lighthearted and fun, and change it up, you know. So, and like I say, training can be just getting them to stand while you put their rugs on, or getting them to sit, or, you know, listen to you. And in the early days, you may only have a very short attention span. It might not be a really long-winded way of having their attention for very long. So make the use of what you've got and build on that. Yeah. Don't expect too much. That's probably the biggest thing. Yeah. Cool, Susie.
Well, that was fun.
Yeah.
See, keep it short sessions, you know, 20 minutes.
Keep it light, keep it fun. I'm just going to scratch Susie behind the ear now, and we can mutually muzzle each other.
Thank you.
Thanks everybody for joining us.
Thank you for playing with us, and we'll see you again next time. Bye, everybody. Bye, Viv.